G'day and welcome again to another Campfire Project discussion. Today I have with me both Peter Balcarek and also Michael Lauria. G'day guys, how are you doing?
Hey Alan, good thanks.
Very well, thank you.
It's great to have both of you here. The other week we had Kyrie Oliver with us as well, and we had such a great time. We decided we needed to bring the three of you back together again. But Kyrie's just sent me a message and saying he can't make it. He's just been caught up with an emergency. And as you'll find, all the listeners out there, when men like these are working with other people and things come up, those people have got to take precedence as always.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Peter, for being here, and also Michael. Now, when we spoke last week, we sort of found that we had a theme of different things that we wanted to cover, and it seemed to be flowing on. We spoke quite extensively last week, but it came out of it, we were talking about the fictitious patriarchy as we see it, and our struggle against that, the misnomers and misunderstandings, and how can men deal with situations where they're asked to share their feelings, and once they do, it's taken the wrong way. So, Michael, you were the one who suggested looking at the fictitious patriarchy, and Peter, you started off last week, so I'd love you to start off this week, if you would, Michael.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of this especially all over social media, where people are talking about this, or especially feminists and a lot of women are talking about a society that we exist in where it is very patriarchal and dominantly so. And one of the things that we struggle with in the work that we do is trying to really bring to people's awareness that we actually don't live in this patriarchal society. Perhaps we did many years ago, and I'm talking about a century or more ago. And some people would argue that maybe even 50 or 60 years ago that was the case. But in today's day and age, this is not the case at all. Women in general women across the globe actually, in Western culture especially, they have more rights now than they've ever had before. More freedoms, more opportunity, more everything than they've ever had before. And in fact, men have actually stepped back quite a bit and helped to facilitate the process of women's rights and feminism, and really stepping up. And there's been so many areas where men have really contributed to women's rights and helping them to really embody their potential and discover their potential as well as women, because women have just as much potential and strength as what men do. And what we have to understand is that we complement each other. And when we talk about a patriarchy, what that really says is that the world is run by men. That's what it really says. When in fact we just have a look at our society and it's just not run by men. If men are actually being quite honest about it, we don't usually do much at all without consulting the woman in our life, or that very important woman in our life. And so that to me doesn't indicate that we live in a patriarchy. That indicates that we live in a society where I think the majority of people are trying to be respectful of each other, and they're trying to work together, and we're trying to create equality, but more about equality of opportunity. And I think this is where we're really falling over, because the feminists out there and the really hard liners out there are focusing more on equality of outcome. And that means that they want more women in more powerful positions. And that's about outcome. And that's wrong, because what we have to be doing, the people in powerful positions, the people in leadership positions, really need to be the ones who have the highest level of competence, exactly. who can lead people, as opposed to just having ratios of male to female employees in organizations or in government, or at the highest levels of big companies. It should be based on competence as opposed to sex. And I think if we start to focus more on equality of opportunity, then we'll get better results. And that doesn't indicate a patriarchy to me. When we're all focused on equality of opportunity, that's not a patriarchy. A patriarchy says, well, no, men have to occupy all the high leadership positions, and not women. That's the patriarchy, and we don't live in that society.
I've had a real problem with this quota business, simply because That's all based on ego and other things. It's not based on getting a great result for the country or any other, whether it be an organisation, whatever.
Yep.
No matter who is the best person for the job, no matter what gender or anything else, they're the people we should have in those jobs. We look
Correct.
at our governments today, and all we're seeing is fighting between both the all the different groups, but also the men and women. You know, do we have the right people in any of those roles?
Yep.
Forget about the quotas. Let's just get the right people. So,
absolutely, I totally agree. We just have a look at our political system right now. We just had an election, and we look at our political system right now, and I don't think we've got anyone in the right position doing the right thing at the moment. So, but that's arguable as well, isn't it?
well, that's right.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I second a lot of what Michael and yourself said. I think the key word here is, and Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. You know, he provides a detailed analysis in many of his talks about, you know, the difference between equal opportunity and equality of outcome. You know, and I come from Eastern Europe, and I lived until the age of 10 in a communistic country, right? That communism was derived from Marxism, right? And even though I didn't experience it in my productive years, I do remember, you know, my parents and telling me, you know, like this was a society where the equality of outcome was pursued, and it was pursued only at the theoretical level, but it actually didn't work at the practical level. It's just not going to work at the practical level. It's not human. You know, we cannot have the same outcome putting in different effort. And again, this is very simplified, but we need to look at what the people are interested in, what they want to do, and take the opportunity that they have. And that's why when we look at, you know, the management of big organizations and government, yes, it's true. Most of people that are in power or more in authority are men. But then there are other areas where most people are women, you know. So you have education system where most teachers are women, you know, a lot of doctors, a lot of social sciences. This is women. And we don't look at that area as being matriarchal. We look at that something that is just simply evolved in that way. And looking at Australia, you know, again, coming from Eastern Europe, I think Australia is one of the best countries for this, you know, equal opportunity. It's even incorporated in the code of conduct of the biggest organizations, you know, so it's equal opportunity approach to everything that we do. And it is then up to the individual to take advantage of this very great environment, and then, you know, take the opportunity and use the opportunity to the best ability. But the outcome is going to be different because everyone's abilities are different and everyone's interests are different. So I completely agree with Michael. The equality of outcome, I think, is actually a pathological ideology that is not going to help anyone, and it's actually starting to infiltrate the thinking and of many people, especially I would say the younger generation. And I'm very, I'll be honest, I'm quite actually scared, you know, what's going to happen if this is going to be implemented across the social norms in our society, in Western culture. And we'll see. Only time will tell, right?
I'll share with you something, because I work with organizations as well in change management. And one of the organizations that I work with, the managing director called me on Friday and he said, I've got a bit of an issue, Michael, I need some help with. And it was cool. So he needs to replace somebody. So somebody's leaving and needs to employ somebody else. He's interviewed some candidates and he's down to 2 people. One of them is a 28-year-old guy who's got about 5 years experience in the industry. And the other one is a 27-year-old woman who has pretty much exactly the same experience in the industry. Both of them are equally qualified to do the job. And his question to me was, who do I employ? He said, because I'm worried that the woman may fall pregnant over the next few years, because I know that you know, she's married and she's been married for a couple of years, and I'm worried that if I employ her, in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, she might fall pregnant, decide to have children. Nothing wrong with that and no judgment. But then I have to give her maternity leave, and I have to keep her job open, and I have to then get somebody else and retrain them. And that's a cost to the business. And so there's all this stuff, right, that people are, and he's actually quite afraid of not employing her, because if he does, it might be seen to be discriminatory. It might be seen to be discriminatory. And so when we talk about a patriarchal society, and then we look at it in the context of equality of outcome, if we apply that principle, the equality of outcome principle here, then it says that he must have a certain ratio of female to male staff in his organisation. And at the moment, it's unbalanced. He has more male staff than he has female. And so he feels an obligation to employ this this woman, to kind of even the numbers a little bit, when in fact, that might not be the best thing for the company. And then what happens is that this woman may not want to have children. Who knows? But you're not even allowed to ask that anymore.
Yeah.
Because even that's discriminatory, just asking, do you intend to have children in the future? And the issue that we face here in society is that men can't have children. That's not an issue, but that's just a fact, right? A biological fact. Men can't have children, only women can.
That's for the moment.
For the moment, yes, exactly.
At the moment, that's the truth. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years, it's not going to be the truth.
Exactly.
And if you decide to identify as a woman, maybe you will be able to have children.
Maybe. Who knows? But then how do these principles apply? I mean, if he employs the male, then that throws out his so-called ratios, and then that can be called discriminatory. It can be called, maybe he's trying to create a patriarchal workplace. Who knows what people might think or say. So I want to sort of ask, what do we do in situations like that? Because we also talk about what's the backlash, right? And I wonder if there was a woman out there running a company who needed to create ratios of male to female employees and was faced with a very similar situation where would she employ the woman simply because of the fact that she had to even out the ratios, knowing full well that may not be in 12, 18 months, 2 years, the best thing for the company, because that's going to be a cost to the company in maternity leave, hiring another staff member for a short period of time and training that staff member, keeping a position open for someone who may not decide to fill it again. So there's all these questions around that. And I'll be honest about this, and I'll say to you that when I spoke with him about this last week, I said, I don't really have a very good answer for you here. All I can really say is you need to go with whatever it is that you feel. And who do you feel can do the job better? Yeah.
Because there's too many other things to be taken into consideration, right? If you look at the individual, yes, it can be discriminatory towards her. At the same time, how does that, if she does fall pregnant, she does leave, etc., and the extra cost of running, getting somebody else into that role, does that affect the viability of the business and therefore affect the job of everybody else? So then looks at, well, what's the rights of everyone else? How far and how wide do we go in our analysis? Do we just look at the individual, or do we look at the collective group around them, or the bigger picture again?
Yeah. So here's the thing. We've got to look at the collective, and we have to do this with every situation, no matter whether we're talking about a patriarchal society or a so-called patriarchal society, or we're just looking at anything at all in society. We have to look at what is best for the collective that also serves individuals at a high level, but more so what works for the collective, because we're a collective. We have to ensure that whatever we do is all inclusive as a collective. We can't try to do everything for individuals and serve individuals, because what happens then is you don't end up doing what's best for the collective. And that goes back to ratios within the workplace and within government. If we do what's best for the individuals and we talk about equality of outcome, that doesn't lend itself to creating equality of opportunity for everybody. Because then then you'll end up with men who miss out on roles which they're highly qualified for or more qualified for, who can bring companies forward at a much greater rate because they've got more experience, they've got more competence in that particular role. But they will then start to miss out on roles because companies have to make sure that they adhere to ratios.
Yeah, well, I mean,
gender ratios.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. So what that means is that if you prioritize the purpose of, or the objective of equality of outcome, then you are pretty much minimizing your chances to provide equal opportunity to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
And I think that you put it really nicely there. You know, so what are you gonna do? Are you gonna make sure that, okay, we have to have 50% women, 50% men, but does that mean that maybe 40% of men will not have that equal opportunity because of that particular objective, which is the equality of outcome, right? So it's a tough one. I think it's quite a complex issue as well, and yeah, who knows where this is gonna go.
It sort of brings out discrimination either way, because I know the federal police at one stage were only employing women to bring their numbers of women up in the organisation. That then for that was discriminatory against the males of that age group who could have had a job as well. So it becomes really difficult. It's pretty much a no-win situation.
Exactly.
Very
so
hard.
Like in that situation that you just described, Dylan, you know, how was that situation looked at? You know, is it even possible today in today's society to say that something is discriminatory against men? Is it even possible to say that? Because I think that it should be possible to say that. At the same time, once we say that, there's certain groups will respond to that, saying that, well, man, you guys have had your time for the last thousands of years. Now it's time for you to sit, you know, on the sideline and everybody else to have a go. And that's in its principle is discriminatory, isn't it? You know?
It is. You're always going to have in these situations, we've got to have quotas, we've got to have things evened out, etc. There's got to be discrimination against somebody. You discriminate, if you're saying, right, we've got to give more to the women, then you're going to be discriminating against the men. If you say, no, well, I really just want men in the organisation, you're discriminating against the women. It's a no-win situation. So for anybody who's in a leadership role or a management or ownership of a business, they really have to do their homework. They have to look at all the pros and cons of employing each person based on their ability to do the work.
Yeah. And I think it should be fine. I think it should be possible for somebody who is running a business to decide, hey, you know what? All these positions, I want them to be filled by women. They should have the right to do that, you know, without being labeled as somebody who is discriminating. At the same time, you know, somebody who is running a business should be able to decide, I want these positions to be filled by men.
And you know what else? I also believe there's another aspect of this, and people actually need to take responsibility for what they choose to do in life and how that could affect other areas of their life too. So, for instance, when we're talking about in the context of the workplace where we talk about equal opportunity, and we're talking about equality of opportunity as opposed to outcome, then I think there's also the onus is on women, because men can't fall pregnant at this stage, as we talked about before, but women can. And so I think there needs to be a level of responsibility for women too, if equality of opportunity is going to actually be something that we can strive for and actually be successful in attaining, then women need to take responsibility for the fact that if they commence in a position in a workplace and then 6 or 9 or 12 months later, they fall pregnant and then take maternity leave, I think there should be something that is fair for all parties, where it's even a contractual thing. So they sign a contract for a period of time that's agreed upon by both parties, in that they will occupy the position. And if they choose to fall pregnant or they choose to change their personal circumstances, which will in some way impact on their position, then that means that they lose certain not so much rights, but certain what's the word in the workplace? Benefits, such as maternity leave and things like that. Like, I just think we need to have some structure around this, and then I think we will actually achieve this equality of opportunity on a greater level, because whilst most people won't say it, if they're faced with the same situation as what this person is that I'm working with, the propensity will be that they will employ the male simply because of the risk. And that's not that's not equality at all.
Definitely not.
So we need to form some structure and framework around this so that we can legitimately and genuinely and authentically have some equality of opportunity here, because we don't, and I understand why we don't, but small business and even medium business can't afford to have, 50% of their workforce women who will potentially fall pregnant, and then they have to retrain new people, and then have paid maternity leave and all sorts of things. Businesses just can't afford it. And so, yeah, we have to create something around this. So it's all well and good to talk about equality, but when we've got situations where people are making choices in their personal life which affect businesses and organisations, and then in turn our economy, there needs to be some responsibility there from both parties.
That's right, because it affects everybody else there in that
It does.
organisation as well. And
It
this
does.
business about quotas, really, that was just a cop-out. It was one way to get away from all the issues, because this is a major issue, and to do that sort of planning and mapping it all out, it's a huge task. But the government and others have just said, oh, well, let's just have a quota. Well, that's a coward's way out of the argument, which only just creates more arguments.
Exactly. And this is what it creates. It then creates, well, what happens to men who now are going for interviews and they're equally as qualified, but then the employer feels like they must employ the woman because of quotas and because of how they need to be seen to be adhering to those kind of quotas in the workplace or in government or in big organisations, whatever the case may be. Yep. And that's still not equality.
No, I don't think we'll ever have equality, no matter how deep we go into it, because there's always going to be something there. But it always depends on where you sit. Because if you're the individual, yes, it's discrimination against you. But if you're part of the workforce that person's joining and it can affect your livelihood, that's discrimination against you. If the person who doesn't get the job because of those quotas, then that's discrimination.
Yep.
So we're always going to have discrimination, but how can we make it as fair as possible to everybody concerned?
Yeah, how can we just minimise the impact of this kind of thing? Definitely. And I do believe that if we're talking about this in the context of organisational structure, then it's got to be more about equality of opportunity, and that equality of opportunity needs to extend to taking personal responsibility for the fact that you've been given the opportunity. That's cool. So if you're a woman, you've been given the opportunity because there's equality of opportunity. So then don't abuse that opportunity by then choosing to do something in a few months' time after you've been trained and after you've just started to be, effective and constructive and contributory within a workplace, and then you fall pregnant, and then then the company then has to try and replace you and also hold your position open for maternity leave. So I think there's got to be some give from both sides if we're going to be able to create an environment in our society where there is very little or no discrimination.
Yeah, well, like and again, you dropped another keyword there, Michael, which is the personal responsibility. Is it as well, like, do we maybe live in a society where under the veil of equality, we try to avoid taking personal responsibility? If you go and you have equal opportunity and you don't get a job, it's not because you're discriminated against. Sometimes you're just not the most suitable candidate, and that's it.
But the problem with that is if you're a woman these days and you can find some angle as to, and I'm not saying all women are like this. It's only a very small percentage of women that do this sort of stuff, but it's those that have the loudest voices that make the most noise. And when we have, situations like this guy, if he just asks one question, 5 years, or where do you see yourself in 3 years' time?
We've lost you there, Michael. Can't hear you.
Sorry, is that better?
You're still a bit faint.
Sorry. Yep. Sorry about that. So all it takes is for this employer to ask this female applicant, what are your plans over the next 5 years, or where do you see yourself in 2 or 3 years' time? And then if she doesn't get the position, she could quite easily say, and this has happened many, many times in the past in other organisations, we've seen it, where she says, well, I was asked to, taken down a line of questioning, which was meant to bring out whether I was going to intend to start a family over the next 3 years. And I said that I would maybe want to start a family, and possibly, and so I didn't get the job because of that. And then all of a sudden the employer is dragged through court for discrimination. And so this is the stuff that we've got to try and stop.
There should be some questions that they can ask as long as it has a particular flow. Because if it's to work towards that agreement of, okay, over this number of years, we really need you to be here all the way through, then you should be able to take that line. But as soon as because of all this political correctness and everything else and what we can and we can't say, it's caused so many problems that therefore causes that person in the back to sit there and go, well, what do I do now? And therefore possibly make the wrong decisions for the person, for the people around them, for the people who also applied for the job, but also the organisation, the longevity of it, the survival, and therefore the livelihood of all those other people.
Yeah, and this guy is a small business. He's a small business with four employees or 5 employees or something, and he simply can't afford that. He can't afford the potential, or creating the potential, or allowing the potential, where he employs someone, trains them for 3 months, they're effective in the job for another 3 to 6 months, and then drops a bomb like that. Yeah, so he's got to start the whole process again.
There very much needs to be a process where you can ask particular questions following a format to be able to elicit what's actually going to happen over that future, so you know what's going to happen to your organisation and the people around you, instead of the coward's way out of just saying, no, you can't mention these things because that's discrimination. That just causes extra problems for us. So we've got to be able to work around that one. It's not an easy problem or a solution. It's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely it will. And when we go back to what we were talking about initially, which is the so-called patriarchal society, it's these kind of issues that start to create an environment where it may appear as though there is a patriarchal society happening, or whether it's behind the veil or in front of the veil. Either way, there's all of this stuff happening within people's minds that causing them to doubt their choices and make choices that appear as though they're trying to fill workplaces with men. And it's not the case. It's not the case at all. Yeah.
So if you look at that situation with the 2 people and you go, rightio, the male, if he then turned around and went, I didn't get the job because she was female, it was because of and I'm being discriminated against. Well,
and that's happening now.
We haven't got a patriarchal society straight away, because as far as, for men to actually express themselves, we're still getting put down, even though we're told for the last few years, we're supposed to stop holding it down. We're supposed to be sharing. We're supposed to let people know our feelings. But lo and behold, if he turns around and he says, well, my feelings are I'm being discriminated against, he wouldn't hear the end of it.
Yeah.
No, well, that's right.
Probably wouldn't get hired again, nowhere. Yeah.
Well, yes, there's probably that as well.
Yeah. So there's no win to this. It's whoever, and this is the thing, when you've got a number of people applying for a job, there's always going to be people who miss out. And they're all going to have their own personal feelings of their own impressions of themselves. And I should have got this job because I was the most experienced, without even knowing what the other people's experiences are. They just made an assumption by looking at them and going, oh, I feel like I'm more experienced than that person, so therefore I was discriminated against. There's a whole massive different things that come out of it. No one's going to be happy.
No one's going to be happy. And in this guy's case, if he employs the man, then what will, and if this woman is so inclined that she decides to take it further, and it actually gets to court under discrimination, then the company then has to make available all of their files and information, and then there's the comparison between the two, and they say, well, why didn't you employ her? They've got equal experience and are equally as qualified for the position. Why didn't you employ her? And the answer is what? What's the answer?
Well, because
what's the answer?
Yeah, because she can get pregnant, right? Yeah, and that's the truth.
And then that's discriminatory. That's straight away. That's discriminatory.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yep. So it's a no. I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
No, there is. I don't think there is or definitely not an easy one, and possibly there is no real answer to it. No definitive answer. It's going to be situation by situation, and being able to balance looking with broader eyes again and getting more information and going, right, what's not only the two people applying for the job, but the people around them, the longevity of the organisation. Who are the clients they're going to be working with? Who's going to be better suited to working with, if they're working with clients? Which one, they might be both equally experienced, but what's their ability to deal with clients? So there may be some variations in that. No two people are going to be identical. If you look deep enough, you're going to find some area where there's some difference. And if that difference is important, then you would use that as the judgment criteria.
Yeah, and even that comes down to perspective and perception, doesn't it?
That's it.
Yep, and everyone's perspective and perception is going to be different. So it's one of those impossible things where, you know, I mean, we're not going to come up with the answer today, but we definitely need to have much bigger discussions around how to be able to manage a situation like this, and how we encourage people to take more personal responsibility for the impact of their personal decisions on the workplace.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just as well, like, I mean, the ability to actually even discuss it, because in the case study or the scenario that you have provided, Mike, right? Like, this guy needs to be able to evaluate his choices. And if currently in the current climate, the choice that he would like to make is that, okay, well, I can't take the risk with the woman. I have to employ the guy. And if that is considered discriminatory, what is the other option that he has, and who can he discuss the other option with? If he was even discussing this publicly, or even maybe even with the candidates, right? If he was discussing this openly with the candidates, that's already considered in a way discriminatory. So
straight away,
the inability to even discuss this means that there's just no open discussion about it, and that's why if there's no discussion, there is no plausible options available to the person that is impacted by the situation. And that is the vicious circle that, hey, you know, like I know I'm going to have to make the option that is not good for me, but I have to do it because the community asked me to do so. So
yep. And then I kind of wonder as well, would women be prepared to sign contracts, and men as well, right? Because men have just as much responsibility and should have equal responsibility in parenting these days as women. And I wonder if everybody, and we let's make this, we talk about equality, so we make it equal. So I wonder if everybody, male and female, would be willing to sign a contract when they first begin employment to say that if they choose to take maternity or paternity leave, or their work is, or their position is impacted at all by personal choice, then the company has the right, if they wish to terminate employment if their personal situation impacts on the business. I wonder if people would be prepared to sign that.
That'd be interesting to see, because that would come down fair to the employer, because at the moment the employer is taking the gamble of bringing somebody on, doesn't know whether they're going to be there for a long period of time and how it's going to affect the business. It's one of the biggest, you know, people think, well, I was great on the tools, I'll start my own business, and they go into business, have no idea what they're actually walking into, because we've got all this stuff around it. It's probably one of the reasons why a lot of us don't employ. We have business partnerships and collaborations. That way, none of these issues come into it, and we can break a partnership. Somebody, you know, their pathway changes. We just separate our direction. We move on to the next person. But when you employ, this is going to be a major problem for an employer.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as we can agree to take personal responsibility for how our personal choices affect the business or the company that we work for, then I think that will start to we'll be able to have better discussions around how to do this, and how to actually then create an environment of equality of opportunity, because then everyone's on the same stage. Everyone's on the same stage, operating from exactly the same place, has exactly the same opportunity. Yeah.
You mentioned before we'd probably get a bit of flack over this particular discussion. But,
yeah, we will.
It'll be interesting to see whether it's on that point that we get a lot of our flack. And I'm just curious, because that will then prove we got a lot of flack in just that one area. It would prove to me that people don't want to take responsibility.
Well, people don't want to take responsibility. People that we live in a society these days where people are more than happy to place blame elsewhere, external to them, and take responsibility for their own choices and their own personal circumstances. You know, we live in again a society of people where people don't take responsibility, and they don't take and they have this sense of entitlement around lots of different areas. And this is where we're saying, and you know, just the fact that we have ratios within workplaces, that's entitlement. That's entitlement. That just because you're a woman, it means that you should automatically qualify for 30 to 40% or 50% of the jobs out there and the positions available out there just because of your gender, without taking into consideration your level of competence in that position. That's inequality straight away. And that's entitlement straight away.
So you have a particular field, the women who are applying for the job, all the ones that were the most qualified were women. Well, you'd employ them.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
you employ
No
the person
issue.
who's the best for the job, but you have to be covered in the way in which you choose who's the best for the job. So that comes back onto the business owner to make sure they've done their homework on that side of it. To be very careful how they put it forward.
You know, Jordan Peterson was interviewed on the ABC on Q&A in the ABC a few months ago, and they were talking about this. They were talking about equality of opportunity and against equality of outcome in the workplace. And he made a very good point to one of our politicians on that panel. And he said, you know, you're not not asking for equality here in bricklaying or on the front lines of war. You're talking about equality in powerful leadership positions within governments and massive organisations. So if you want equality, we've got to talk about equality in all sectors and in all industries and in all jobs, as opposed to just the ones where that it means that women have more power in society.
And the inability of us having an open discussion about this publicly, that's something that is really worrying me, because as soon as somebody says something that is not going along with the narrative or can be considered offensive, straight away that person is shut down, and straight away the person is labeled as something. And it's like, how are we going to enable these people with different opinions maybe cooperate so that their opinions can come closer together as opposed to away from each other, if people are getting shut down for having opinions, right? So like if straight away if somebody shares something and you shut them down for it, they will never share it again, and they will keep their opinion, and they will create more resentment.
That's it.
I mean, and you can see it now, even with the election we had on Saturday. It's like two camps, and one camp is attacking each other. Okay, you vote Labour, you must be an idiot. You know, you vote Liberal, you must be a racist or something. You know. And just these vast generalizations, it's just crazy. And this, as opposed to like having a discussion like this, potentially, and maybe probably disagreeing, but educating each other so that we can come to a solution that is good for everybody as much as possible, as opposed to the solution only being good for a group that is, you know, under the veil of compassion and equality, the right one to follow. You know?
I think if we all go into this and into everything with the attitude that we actually just want the best for the collective and for society, and we can just assume that everyone has that attitude, then I think we'll have better quality discussions. But when we go into these discussions, we assume that men want a patriarchal society and women just want to all be feminists. And the problem with that is that there's no middle ground there. It's either one way or the other. And if we just go into these discussions from a higher level and start to understand that we actually all want the same thing, and that is competent people doing good jobs in the positions that they're meant to be in, then I think we will get much better outcomes.
That's exactly right. See, it's like the Men Too movement and the Me Too movement. They're just two different camps that are fighting with each other, and there's no solutions coming from those, because everyone's bitter in each group towards the others. That was why the We Together hashtag was put together, because that was all inclusive. You know, we're talking about kids at school not getting inclusive education these days. We're talking about all these things where we need inclusion. And so we then turn around and create these hashtags which are all exclusive from each other, excluded from each other. So, you know, when we get like the campfire, it's all about people coming in and having discussions. So if anybody doesn't agree with what was said, we'd love to hear the comments. We'd love to then discuss, well, why do you feel that way? By talking together and delving into it deeper without taking sides, we'll find solutions and we'll find better ways of doing things in agreement.
And I would also encourage people that if they have a perspective on what we're talking about, definitely share it. And before you post your comment or before you ask your question, just check in with yourself and ask yourself, is my question or is my comment for the greater good, or do I have an agenda? And is my agenda to just get more women in the workplace, or is my agenda to create a patriarchal society? Think about what it is that you're asking and really check in with yourself and your intentions and the energy behind what it is that what you're posting, because I love to answer questions and be challenged and see different and be exposed and see different perspectives. But it's when people start attacking and getting personal that I just don't engage. And I don't think any of us really do. So I love good quality discussions. So definitely engage with us and ask us questions. Just check in with yourself about your intentions first.
That's right. Well, as Peter was saying before, and that you can force somebody, you can force your opinion on somebody, they'll go quiet and everything goes, but they'll still be of their original opinion. And so you haven't solved anything. All you've done is just run your own agenda and haven't won a damn thing. By having a conversation, you start to get some victories because you start to get understanding.
We do. That's right. And when we talk about it specifically, I think the overarching theme today has been about equality in the workplace, or equality of opportunity in the workplace. And so when we're talking about this, I would love everybody who has an opinion or would like to comment on this to put yourself in the position of managing director and or CEO of your own company, right? Of your own company. And when you think about the prospect of somebody that you employ, you could train them for 3 to 6 months, and it costs you money and time to do that. And then in 9 or 12 months' time, they come to you and say, "Hey, good news, I'm pregnant, and I'm going to stop working in 6 months, and you'll have to replace me. And I want you to keep my job open for 12 months after that, and I also want you to pay me." And rah 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 rah. How is that going to affect your decision-making process? And what safeguards would you like in place for you as a business owner and a CEO in order to try and minimize the impact of that on the business? And would you like people to be taking more personal responsibility? Because when things happen in our personal lives, intentional or otherwise, they do affect the company that we work for. And so how would you, as a CEO or a managing director, what sort of safeguards would you like to put in place, or what kind of considerations would you like there to be in order to ensure that your company or your business remains sustainable and you're not just throwing money away basically for people's choices that they make in their personal lives? Yep.
That's a very good one. I like the idea of that. So not just coming from where you sit at the moment as an individual, but put yourself on the other side and answer the question from that point of view.
From that perspective, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for us to sit behind our phones or our computers and judge a point of view or an opinion when you're not in that position of having to make the decision, and not just having to make the decision, but then having to take responsibility for the decision, and that choice will then personally impact you and your livelihood and the health and well-being of your company
and your family,
and your family as well.
And the family of those other people that you've got working for you. It's,
correct.
We had Marianne Williamson, who's running for the presidency in America. I've been listening to some of her videos about how she's trying to bring consciousness back into politics, instead of going from a state of war to a state of love. That same question does the same thing. It goes into the collective. How do we feel about the people around us? Are we thinking just from our point of view, or are we thinking from the point of view of our community around us? When we start thinking about our community, like being the best you can be for yourself is one thing, but being the best you can be for yourself to help other people, that's another thing altogether. The first one's ego.
Yep.
The second one is based on love, and it's based on the community. It's far more valuable. So think about the answers to the questions from that point of view, not an individual point of view, but a community point of view, and go, well, what is best for the community? Because ultimately, that's what's also best for each of us.
Correct. What serves the community serves the individual too.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So any further comments on that, Peter?
No, I agree. I don't have anything else to add, I think.
And you too, Michael?
I think I've said enough.
We'll probably get a few comments saying we probably said more than we should have, but
yeah, well.
But thanks, guys. We've got some more things that we talked about, and we had a whole list, because anytime all this is out there, whenever anybody comes into the panel discussions, I'll ask them what they would like to speak about. And between Peter, Michael and Kyrie, who we had on the last one, there were so many ideas that we knew we had to run a number of different panels with all of us to get through those. So probably about 5 or 6 at least. So it's really great that you two guys were able to make the time again today to come on. It's a shame that Kyrie had the emergency right at the last minute. But to everybody else who's been out there and listening to this, thanks for being along. And as Michael has said, think about the way in which you answer those questions, and please do make some comments on the comments field, and let's get some discussion going and just see what we're able to come up with along the way.
Yeah, some respectful discussion where
that's it. Always
where we can take opportunity, to broaden our horizons and potentially change our opinions if we have enough data or facts to change our opinions. Because changing opinions isn't a bad thing. Changing opinions makes you grow, and good discussion makes you grow as well. If it is done, if it is done in like respectful and community and friendly manner, and that's how opinions get changed.
That's right. And open minds create good perspectives.
Yeah,
that's it. It's those discussions, open and meaningful discussions, that we create solutions. The opinions just on their own just create fractions between us and never solve anything, just create further problems. And
exactly.
It's always, as you said, Peter, respectful, and as Pauline Crawford had said in previous ones when we've had her on the group here as well, always make them meaningful discussions as well. So, let's have those meaningful discussions. And thanks, guys, for being here again today, and to everybody who's been listening in. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next project discussion. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, guys.